very briefly, I went to some local farmers a couple of years ago, and I pitched one of these programs to them, and they didn't bat an eye and said, "Hey, listen, we know we have more food than we need." This is right after the tornadoes that just got to the southwest. They said, "We know that there are people hurting out there. We'd be happy to do this." And I said, "Do you need any sort of written agreement?" He says, "If my word's good enough for you, your word's good enough for me." He was very genuine, and there's a realization of need and a desire amongst a lot of people to really do good work. So it takes communication to break through those barriers. It takes communicating to people that they are protected from a legal standpoint, which is a big one. But I'll get into some of those issues tomorrow.
Okay. A second quick question. Chip Ordman has raised the question of what happens at IRAS that I can go back and take to my community or my congregation and present to the high school or something like that. And in ministry, it is useful to have little curricula for adult religious ed. And I wondered if I were to try to create a brief curriculum for maybe 2 or 3 nights for adult RE, if you'd be willing to help me do that.
Sure. If you ask me in front of all these people, what am I going to say? And yes, I'd be happy to help.
Yeah, the effective shape.
Hello.
Jane Benson had an early slide, if I remember right, that was field to fork.
Yes. Last slide.
Well, it was short stages, the steps. So the last one is clean the plate. But the early steps, I'm thinking of, I can't think personally about the big distribution questions, but I'm aware of friends who've run gleaning programs in Colorado or have assembled agreements with grocery stores. In food banks, in recent years in the Northwest, donations are weighed down by grocery stores because of the now secondary market of the dollar stores, which is good in a way. It's not being wasted.
Right.
And I think that's even true with their produce. But anyway, I was wondering if you could just take a minute to talk about some of those steps and things that kind of following up on where we could fit in if we're not strategic planners in distribution questions.
Well, as you said, this is sort of a big picture look. This goes from harvest through post-harvest, through production for animals, and you see an uptick in that process too, and then losses in distribution in households. I think this part down here obviously is the key for your and you didn't mention, but you're with a food bank in Seattle area, right? So I think this is obviously where you want to focus, and I'm,
It's an agrarian area too.
Right.
There are gleaning programs at this harvest.
Right. Yeah, and so I would say, gleaning programs certainly good. If there are local ag schools that you can partner with, or local partners that farms that you can partner with directly for plant-a-row type programs. Great things tend to, as soon as you create one of those relationships, they tend to build in my opinion, and what I've seen so far. For all kinds of reasons. And one, I started one with a local farmer who knew that I had started one with another organization, and he had a spirit of healthy competition between him and this group, and so he wanted to do more, and so he did. He also wanted to, he never grown a certain crop before, and he wanted to learn how to do it, and he said he used this as an opportunity. He said, I want to learn how to grow broccoli, but I need to make an investment for a machine to do that, and so I'll devote some of my land to doing that, to growing it directly for you. So I think there are great opportunities to do direct plant-a-row programs or direct growing programs for organizations like yourself. That was very successful.
Recapturing foods that are otherwise being lost and getting them to the obvious presenting themselves poor and under food insecure people. Is that a significant piece of it? At least, I guess, for us.
Sure, yeah.
And then what about legislatively? We're talking about will and raising the visibility of it as an issue.
Yeah, and I think legislatively one of the big issues is, providing incentives to create those donations, and one way to do that is to increase the cost of food waste going to the landfill, right? And so some northeastern states are getting on that bandwagon, Massachusetts, Vermont, I believe. Legislation can increase the cost of putting, throwing food into the landfill. People are going to look in a hurry toward what are other product uses that they can do for it.
First of all, thank you for making the presentation and making us aware of something that is so huge. And this group is big thinkers about big things, and you're making a presentation about a big problem with big numbers. And sometimes I need to think about little things that I can imagine being possible. So I just wondered what you might think about these almost like Girl Scout cookie ideas. That if there could be something called gypsy soup, and when you put food, not rotten food, but food that has been thrown away, but isn't moldy and rotten, it's just old. You would put that in a big soup and call it gypsy soup, and it could be known as gypsy soup. So lots of different organizations could make gypsy soup, and then gypsy soup would have the nutrients of all of the vegetables. So it would actually be very nutritious. You wouldn't have a lot of liability because you wouldn't be poisoning people. I just wonder if gypsy soup would be a way to kind of get a lot of this food processed into, and lots of different organizations could have gypsy soup. And then I also wondered about, the popsicle man that goes around the neighborhood in the summertime, and we have these food deserts. I wondered if we couldn't take all that fresh fruit, not the rotten fruit, but the fresh fruit, and just make popsicles with no sugar, and just have the popsicle man take fresh fruit into the inner cities and just give.
Yeah, conversion is a good, storage is a big problem. So converting food into, that would go bad, produce vegetables would go bad into, freezing it, converting into smoothies, things that can be frozen, refrigerated, that extend their life, I think is a great way to, soup's a great way to do that. So.
Yeah, because at least you're killing whatever too.
Yeah, so, and you can freeze it, and it makes it, it extends the life, but it also makes it easy to distribute. And so, yeah, I think we're trying to. Yeah.
It was such a big topic.
Oh, thanks.
So thank you for taking on the very big topic, which are the savings and the additional food that can come about through prevention of losses, whether it's through storage or through plate waste or whatever. It's very, very important, and it's something that the international community, I think, is spending a lot of time on now, because they are also confronting these limits to production increases in grains, and they want to see where the losses to in fact produce the same thing. So just stick with FAO and see what they're actually doing, if they're actually putting research to their words. But on the other, I guess I take it on a commodity by commodity basis. So where are the losses occurring, and who might address the losses? So basic grains, are you dealing with the big grain dealers? Are they the ones that are dealing with these kinds of losses, and also addressing them through the milling and the additional food processing process of the food chain? Are these the folks who could be most involved? And the question of produce, for the produce that receives very wide distribution, these regulations on what can be sold as grade A or not produce are negotiated between between USDA and the commodity producers, who then have an impact on what the consumers expect to have. But are these commodity producers and USDA who negotiate what the standards will be, are they involved in these kinds of negotiations to think about waste? And then the third category that I think about are grains, basic grains and legumes, including peanuts, that have huge problems with storage that renders them not only product wasteful, but also unsafe, as in aflatoxins. And who gets involved in those? Because what we saw with that terrible peanut scandal a couple of years ago, nobody involved in that story. So can you just comment kind of on those three, who should do it?
Who should do it? I think that's a big question, to a big topic. My work has been predominantly at the local level. I think there's an opportunity for companies and people along the chain, certainly big retailers. I'm starting to get more involved with them. I think they're, processors. I think they're at every stage along the way. I think there are opportunities for partnerships to make headway in this area, and productive ones, and partnerships that will reduce costs at every stage along the way too. I can't really speak to your third one about who's watching the store in terms of items that would get stored would cause even more problems. I just don't have experience in that myself, so it wouldn't be worth my time. What's that?
It might get used, but are really unsafe.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you have to manage for that, and you have to protect the downside, because if you have a project that, where you're trying to do some of this work and you have a negative outcome where people do get sick from something that, from an effort to recapture, reclaim food, it's only going to hurt future efforts. So I think it just takes responsible management throughout the process.
Steve, you showed a food recovery hierarchy.
Yeah. Did you want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, that'll kind of help. They're right there. So we talk a lot of time, the second from the top layers is feed hungry people, but a lot of the food isn't safe at various levels, and so there's other opportunities for handling food waste at that point that is not useful for other purposes. Still help the environment. Feeding animals, that's a good opportunity to eliminate waste. Industrial usage refers to energy. Anaerobic digesters are generating methane from food waste, capturing that methane and using it for electricity generation, which is actually happening a lot on farms with manure. And then composting is the last resort for landfill, and that, of course, is just returning that organic matter into a soil amendment.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. You made me think a lot about systems, so I have a couple things. One is at the very bottom of the family system, that I was thinking of the link between obesity and food waste, because portion sizes are not, hardly any family knows what a portion size serving is, both for an adult or a child. And so families are often overcooking food, even families that don't have a lot of resources are cooking extra food. They don't understand what a healthy portion size is, and also they don't, the labeling around portions and serving sizes often on packaged foods is not all that clear about what constitutes a serving. So I think there's some family system work that can be done, but I was really struck by your circle and by the fact that maybe one of the understanding points is what the big system is, and then maybe using processes, or talking about using processes as like Six Sigma or the lean process or continuous improvement or quality improvement to really improve the system, but first understanding what the system is and how it's linked back. And then the third thing was, we can send peaches to Taiwan to be packaged and then bring them back as peaches. We can probably get the extra food back to the parts.
Yeah, I think the systems view is definitely a great way to think about this, and there are just so many benefits along the way to corporations from engaging in programs to try and reduce their waste and to put it to good use. I mean, I have a few experiences with this, but at one high-end store, I went to get a breakfast sandwich one day, and it was, I don't know, 11 o'clock, maybe the cutoff was 11, and I was perfectly willing to pay for it, and the woman just chucked it and took it and chucked it in the trash, and I said, I would have taken that. I said, no, it's shrink. I mean, just like, and shrink, they're just conditioned to shrink is, it's 5 minutes over, and, we can't do that. And another, same store, another case where all these pizzas are out on display, and the pizza hit the time limit, and so there was one slice out of the pizza, the other 7 were in it. And I was about to get one of those, and I wish I could explain how quickly the process of folding 7 slices up into one slice that got thrown out, it took about 3 seconds. It was really very artistic and in the speed. And I said, do you don't make the effort to donate any of that? No, we throw it aside. I said, do you think, what do you think about that? Yeah, it's too bad, it's really good. But no, both of those cases, there's no challenging the mindset from above, which, there's no bottom up. It's just, this is what you do, and no one questions it. So I think looking at a bigger perspective is valuable, and there are great savings to corporations from doing this and engaging in these programs. And you mentioned the plate size there. You can find some things out about. There's a slide, I don't have it, but about the size of the American portions from 20 years ago or whatever, and so they're pretty telling.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to address Hugh Joseph's critique and see if I can clarify some of the issues that you identified and that are embedded in your, the answers of which are embedded in your presentation. First is, at a global scale, the FAO data that you use, I think you might have one or two of those charts in your, you want to shift over to one or two of those, maybe the cereal one? I think there was one on cereal, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's one of them. There are others. I would rather just look at the cereal one because it's so much clearer. There it is, yeah. This one, this is developing countries and post-harvest and processing. By the way, this came out in the fall of 2011, and it was an earth-shaking report because it was the first time that these factors were identified so clearly. So if you look at Europe, North America, and the industrialized Asia, and then look at these red areas, and the red areas are the consumers versus the production. That is to retailers. So this is what the consumers do with waste, and this is what the system does with waste. So it's sort of farm to fork, well, farm to grocery store in a sense, is what we're talking about in the North American situation. And so what we have is a huge amount of waste after it gets through the system, either on our plates or in our refrigerators, or on the shelves of these stores that you're identifying, the flip-flop pizza guys' hands. In other words, this is where the waste is occurring. On the other hand, there's a vast amount of waste in these other places, for example, in Latin America or in Africa. So the amount of waste, if you notice, is very high in all of these places, but it's for very different reasons. The reasons are in the harvest process, in the field that this is happening. There's no way to distribute the food, or there's no way to store the food. So it's the entire food chain. If you think about the food chain before it reaches the markets, then you'll understand what's happening in the rest of the world. And that's a vast waste of food. So the word waste, Hugh, is and I'm sure you probably know this, is applied across, and you know this of course too, it's applied across the boards. And so your discussion tonight is largely based upon this column of waste, even though this is for cereal. I think this is total consumption. This is total retail and consumer consumption. So you get a sense of what this is here. So my point is that now if you focus on that one, it's very clear that resources, as Steve has said, I think, resources are going to be saved through this source of waste. So if you would cut that, and that resources, right now we know that the price of meat in China is closely connected, and the price of many other foods throughout the world are closely connected to the price of corn in the United States. We know that for a fact, that the price sort of equalizes in terms of whatever the commodity price is, that's what the number is for everybody, plus whatever is added locally, which can be very substantial. So my point is that there is an enormous savings here that does funnel back if the system, the commodity system, allows that price to actually be saved. And I would argue there has to be a savings of that because you're using less resources, as you were saying. And I think that's so critically important. The other things, of course, are the effects on the environment of the waste. Clearly, there's an effect to greenhouse gases and all the rest of the things that we identified. So I thought it was important to clarify that for everybody. I think these are things you both knew, but I think that maybe not everybody knew the significance of this concept of waste, which is broad and across the boards, and does, my point finally is in 2013, that total amount of waste would feed all the hungry people in the world if we were able to distribute it to them.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for sharing with us your food waste porn. You and I are both kind of outsiders to IRAS, so I'm going to step outside my comfort zone a bit. There's just some thoughts and reflections on this because this is a very big problem. But it struck me that the first presentation of this week on Pika bread, to the way we treat food now is probably never have I seen such an example of the scale between the sacred and the profane. It seems to me that our civilization has grown to the point where we've used industry and others as mediating forces between ourselves and our relationship with the food we eat. That sacredness of food that give us this day your daily bread, the idea that what we put into us is part of the land and is a sacred part. I mean, I think we as a society, as a culture, as a civilization, has lost that. And I would say from an IRAS point of view, again, with Ian's presentation the other day, which also struck me with the science and technology on one side of that square, and with religion and ethics on the other, that what we're hearing is solutions that might work on that technical side. But I would venture that the solution to this problem, the fundamental solution, really lies on the other side. It really lies on the valuing, the religion, the ethical, the moral side of how we as a civilization see food and how we respect it. And if our anthropologists and our theologians can't keep us in touch as a people with the basic sacredness of the food and that whole cycle of us working with our environment, I don't think any amount of technology or economics or collection processes are going to end that problem. I think it's a fundamental respect for the food itself and the work that goes into it, the value that's in it, the resources that are in it. It's really a lack of grace to be able to treat food in the way we treat it now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great point. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the theme of valuing food to a greater degree, and I think this is obviously, I think most people in this audience would agree with that. So great comments. I think we've strayed a long way from that, as I tried to get across tonight a little bit, and so definitely agree.
So when I was a little bit younger and a little bit poorer, there was something called dumpster diving that perhaps some of you are familiar with, but that many young people actually do. They're aware of this problem and that there's actually such a huge amount of food available behind stores and dumpsters. So my first question is, were you ever tempted to dumpster dive yourself as you were thinking of these pictures?
I could have easily done that.
Yeah.
I could have easily. I didn't. I could have. it's a shame to see. I mean, they're powerful pictures, and it's a shame. And the concept you're talking about, there's a term for it called freeganism, and there are people that are committed to it, that are interested in reducing the impact on the environment and using some of this food, and so it's a well-known concept, and as I've shown tonight, if you're in the right area, you probably do it pretty easily.
Okay, I was actually wondering, I have a few questions. Has food waste, if we gave like a time trajectory of food waste in the States, has it always been as pronounced as it is today? And then going back to the EPA hierarchy triangle, I was wondering if you could give an example of some creative solutions, projects that are already underway addressing each one of those elements. And then I was also wondering if there are other countries who are effectively responding to this issue of food waste that we can possibly follow and model.
Okay. As far as history, I started here in the 70s. That's about as far back as I've gone. I think a lot of the literature talks about, in the war years, there was less waste because people were just, much more. That theme of the value of food was much more paramount. And so I don't have statistics on it back prior to the 70s. So that's one aspect. The second part, creative programs, I've done a couple locally with pairing an agricultural college with food banks and food pantries in the area, with some local farmers doing the same thing. There's a great project in Philadelphia that I'm working on with Tom right now, actually, to sort of draw a circle around a certain portion of the city and effectively look for ways to capture all excess food in that area and divert it both for human consumption and if not, you can talk too much about animal, but that's a definite option, and for compost. So, and there are lots of programs like that all around the country going on. To your third one, Europe is ahead of us in this game. I think they're making declarations of certain years and setting certain time goals for eliminating, aggressively reducing organic food waste, and you're starting to see that here with states starting to get on board with banning food waste from going away. So there's and that's good work. Tomorrow in the food in the workshop, I'll go through some data and conversations that I've had with maybe 20 different food banks around the country, and I'll talk about some of the things that they all vary based on their location primarily and what's around them, but also their different resources that they have available to them. But it's very interesting. They all have their unique strengths and skills, and they kind of marry that up with what's available to them in their local areas. So I'll talk about some of those tomorrow in the workshop.
Well, I enjoyed your presentation and, of course, your slides. You can see that you've had a lot of, well, I wouldn't say fun, but a lot of interesting experiences in terms of gaining access to those slides. I want to make one comment and ask if you are familiar, and then a question. The comment is, are you familiar with the book called Trash by William Ramsey? It's Arizona Garbage Studies, and it's done by anthropologists using archaeological methodologies to look into garbage cans in a city in Arizona and to do the analysis, because really all archaeology is an analysis of human waste and refuse from the past.
We call material culture to be nice.
Thank you. See, the other anthropologists. But what they found, and it was also replicated in a study in the UK, was that as incomes decreased, people bought less familiar foods, number one, and foods that were of lesser grades. And meat is the easiest example, but you can also do it in bread and produce. And as they bought these less familiar foods, they threw more of them out than if they had bought the high-quality spread, even in smaller quantities for the same amount of money. They would have used it all up. So it was a very, very interesting finding of the kinds of waste that people have and the influence of declining incomes and income streams, especially in times of stress and loss of a job, for example, of one member of the household in the councils. So you may want to factor some of those things in. But my question is about
Who wrote that?
William Radcliffe.
Right, thank you.
Is it trash or is it garbology?
No, it's not garbage. Oh, garbage. Maybe it's called garbage.
It's garbage.
It is garbage. Sorry.
Garbology is the name of what he named to be the study of that.
That's right. Garbology. Sorry, it's been too long since I read it. It's a wonderful book. I'm going to go reread it. It's on my shelf. Okay, so here's a question. Is part of waste at the household level, and certainly in traditional markets around the world, are there any gender issues related to waste? And should we be considering those? So let me just say at the household level, more women than men buy the food at supermarkets or markets. More women than men prepare the food and decide about portions, usage, waste, peeling, all the things that contributes to household waste from food as opposed to from paper goods. But they also are implicated in paper goods as well. And children's preferences are also factored in, so that they may prepare foods, but the children, I call them guerrilla warfare in the household. I have had children who, when the parent is not looking, just goes over to the garbage can and gets rid of that food that they didn't want to eat. So at the household level, women are responsible for the marketing and it starts at the grocery store as to what the waste is going to turn into. So if you have poor choices, if you overbuy, if the cuts are not familiar, if you buy unfamiliar things because you want to try them, that and the marketing has gotten to you, and it's most likely to do that, that's going to wind up in the garbage. So that's number one. In traditional societies, the women have very few storage. You have that in refrigeration and that. So then they lose all products that way. So it really is quite genderized and affects their income, and they've culled the worst things for their own families. What about men? Because gender issues are both men and women, or women and men. Men may be unfamiliar with the foods, and so may toss things out of the refrigerator. They may not know how to fix them. They may not know whether they're spoiled or not. And most people who are heads and directors of supermarkets are men, and who are making those decisions as to what to throw out and what's fresh and what's not fresh. And corporate is mostly run by men. So I do see waste as a genderized issue, both at the household level and at the supermarket levels. And would you care to comment on that?
Congratulations, I've never been asked that before. I would say that I've really addressed it in total and not along gender lines. I would say that confusion over issues like sell-by dates and best before dates and use-by dates, whether that can confuse anyone, whether it's a woman or a man in the household. So I couldn't comment as to who it impacts more. That and lack of knowledge about how to prepare foods, I think, is another issue. And so if you're getting foods that you're not familiar with, that's a problem. Lack of knowledge of just how long certain products last is an issue. It's interesting. I'm sure there might be some data out there along gender lines. I haven't seen it, but then again, I haven't really looked for it yet either. But you're probably going to do so.
Very good. I'd like to hear the results next year.
All right.
Okay.
appreciate that there's still some questions to go, but I'm mindful of two things. First, and most importantly, that Stephen has been standing on his feet for the last 2 hours talking and taking questions, and also the time is advancing. So can I just ask, could we keep these questions very short, please, and just a quick question that can have a quick response? There'll be other opportunities to talk to Stephen and he's doing a workshop.
Thanks for that.
Chip Ortman, and I'll be as quick as I can. My wife asks whether it would be useful for people to be in touch with national charities such as American Second Harvest, who might have expertise or influence with corporate headquarters. But that leads me to the more general question of sharing expertise and avoiding reinventing the wheel. A couple of churches in Memphis, Tennessee, recently simply established a clearinghouse so that there is now a list of all the food banks and all the meal places serving to the homeless in the city so they can share information. So that, for example, the kosher food bank and the halal food bank are now comparing notes. If a food bank is faced with someone with celiac or gluten intolerance, they can call up the food bank that has expertise about that.
Right. That's a great point. I think there's a lot of, there are a lot of food banks, there are a lot of food pantries, there are a lot of food shelves out there. They're run by a lot of committed people who want to do the best work that they can, and there is often potential for duplication of effort. There is no need to reinvent the wheel in some cases, I think. But often when I talk to people, there is a realization that the best thing that they can do is to facilitate getting food from one place to another, and they don't always need to go and pick it up themselves and deliver it with their own truck. Sometimes just communicating using the phone and facilitating a more local connection can result in that food getting picked up and distributed in a less expensive fashion, and it can create local relationships too. So I think it's a great question. I think there's and I think that oftentimes a great thing to do is just to create a list, like you just said, of different food banks, different pantries and food shelves in certain areas that cover certain areas, and getting that information out there to people is a very effective way to create efficient pickups and distribution. So yeah, distribution, it's a good point.
I'll try to be quick as well. Thank you for a wonderful talk. I just have to acknowledge that this slide of the rotisserie chickens here in the trash can really affects me, because from my perspective, these are some bodies that suffered and gave their lives, and now for no reason other than to end up in the trash. Which made me also wonder, a lot of, I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that there's a large percentage of livestock that dies in the process of transportation from where they were raised to the slaughterhouse, especially like in the middle of the winter when they're being in the back of the truck and they literally freeze to death, or in the summer they go without water and end up dying. Or downer cows that cannot, by FDA regulation, be slaughtered. So there's a lot of tonnage and a lot of grain that has gone into that, and a lot of tonnage. And I'm wondering, in the statistics of that 40% of the tonnage that you were talking about, is that factored in, the lost animals and life and transport? Is that figured into that?
Yeah.
Into that number? Okay.
It's a good way to look at it, though. I mean, I like your phrasing. Those are bodies in there that didn't go to good use. It's an appropriate way to look at it.
I think in simply with the spirit, but I'll take a contrary position and say that we need waste, because over my career and other things, I've become very familiar with the psychotic population, which we're not feeding. And they are feeding themselves out of dumpsters, dumpster diving, and other things. And I would love to see a study to find out how many calories are actually gotten from the waste bin in our psychotic population in the street, because that's clearly something we've neglected. These poor individuals wander around in a different reality and get hungry enough to stop by our local
Yeah, and I haven't seen data on that. I have, interesting point, though, I have recently heard someone say, thank God we have food waste that we do, because it's a buffer, it's a protection against, Saul mentioned wheat rust yesterday, it's a buffer and a protection against some extreme agricultural event that wipes out a lot of food, and it's a point of view. I don't, my focus is a little bit different, but yeah.
On that note, for people who are interested, there's a couple of documentaries. One's called Dive, and another one is called Dumpster. And it just shows the waste and also the rescues, and I recommend them. So you can look them up on, what's that search? YouTube. Not YouTube, Netflix. Yeah, Netflix. They're on there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I just, once again, see if there's one to you for a question. Folks, two last quick notices. First, just to remind you, there is a movie tonight, The Power of Community, How Cuba Survived Peak Oil, at Sound Boathouse at 10.